What was the first red flag you ignored in your worst relationship? Story 1. Mine happened on the very first date. He said he was late because he was having trouble finding parking. He later told me he actually walked to the place from his nearby apartment. Sure, we all make innocuous white lies, but all he did was lie the entire relationship. Story 2. Lack of car for his younger brother. First time I slept over, and we went to pick up breakfast for us and his younger brother. We didn't realize they messed up his brother's order. They legit gave us an untoasted McMuffin, nothing else. It was literally a 2 minutes drive, so I insisted we go back quickly as we just pulled into the driveway. He refused, didn't even offer to give his younger brother his order instead, and got mad when I offered mine up. Told his brother to deal with it, and I got in my car and drove to get the right order for his brother. I didn't mind as it was a 2-minute drive, and I didn't want him eating a plain untoasted McMuffin. Plus, we were left to take care of him, since their parents were out of town for business. Story 3. She literally tried to break up with me and told me she was bad for me, and I convinced her she wasn't. Turns out she was right. I was in that relationship for 6 years and married her. Most traumatic relationship of my life, and took years of therapy to undo the damage. People will tell you who they are in many ways, and you need to listen. Story 4. Honestly, I think I was the problem in my early relationships. I grew up with an abusive mom who told me she should have aborted me, and I think that fucked me up for a long time, and I wasn't the best partner or the best version of me. I didn't purposefully hurt anyone, but I can't say I didn't. Story 5. He threw an absolute fit at the quality of hummus in a Lebanese restaurant, like threw food around the table, yelled at the poor waitress, then stormed out without paying. Then we went to a pub and he was asked to take off his hat, and oh dear Lord, was that a mistake. I was recovering from an abusive relationship, so this guy was differently bad, which was apparently okay. I eventually had to block him and his many alts after he accused me of abuse and threatened to call the police. He had read The Ethical Slut and decided that he was poly and that I had abused him through mutually agreeable monogamy. I now have a good therapist and self-esteem. Story 6. That she didn't get along with anybody. She was an argumentative and controlling person in all of her personal relationships. I ignored all that and thought she'd change, but after I was with her, I saw that she blamed everyone for her own shortcomings and had anger issues and mental issues and refused to get help. Story 7. Not necessarily proud of how I found out. Saw she got a text, looked over, and it was from a dude. She answered it and blurted out something her girlfriend just told her. I ignored it even though I knew. Lust, thinking you're in love, and a complete lack of self-confidence worth made me just say okay and move on like nothing happened. Story 8. Started seeing a 40F who accused every partner she's had since she was a freshman in high school of being abusive and controlling, including eventually both me and the guy she left me for. 1 is unfortunate. 2 or 3 means maybe some therapy is in order. 15 to 20 means you might be projecting a little bit. Spoiler, she was abusive and controlling. Story 9. Everything I liked and enjoyed, he would make fun of me and take the piss. I was young, 18/19ths, and had never had a relationship before. I was very much in love with him too. I felt like I was sad and pathetic, so I stopped doing what I loved and wouldn't tell him anything. I'm 29 now, and never been in another relationship as it seriously changed me. I'm getting back to myself. I know 10 years is a long time, but I'm accepting that now. I now do what I love. I read, I write, I paint, I watercolor. I am happy and content again. I feel like I've got myself back. It took years for me to accept myself again because of this boy. I remember he made me go on a drugs run because he said, no one will think you have anything and you'll be fine. Just go get it and come to my work. When I did that for him, he said, thank God you're a fucking nerd. I was stupid and stayed with him. He used to cry after sex and say how good I was, and I used to be so confused. He ended it by cheating on me and telling me you look nothing like the girls I want to fuck at work. It changed me. I'm now a single 29-year-old trying to get by life and regain myself and my happiness. Story 10. When I met his friends, they all told me I could do so much better. If he was genuinely a good guy, his buddies wouldn't be trying to give me a heads up. He turned into a serial cheater and gaslighter. It was always everyone else's fault and not his, and everyone just made up lies about him just because. Story 11. He constantly talked down about other women. He would comment on their weight, the clothes they wore, would criticize their tattoos, literally anything gug. And as time went on, I was no different when it came to facing his ridicule. Learned a difficult and forever life-altering lesson with him. Story 12. Concerns that are subtly manipulative so that it will guilt-trip you into doing what he wants you to do. Example, don't accept the overseas scholarship because you will not be able to afford living there or have me around for support. It translated into, please, don't go away from me because I'm afraid you will find someone else better than me. Story 13. His parents kept telling me that you do know he has anger issues, right? And my dumb ass was like, it's okay, I love him. Those anger issues were a huge part of our ultimate breakup. When someone's family members warn you about their negative qualities, barring unusual circumstances like toxicity within the family, listen to them. Story 14. It was a very short relationship, but early on we were at his folks and standing around the kitchen. His dad was headed to the store. He asked his dad what he was going to the store for, and his dad was like, oh, some things, milk, bread, I'll probably pick up something for dinner, in the most average and normal tone of voice. I nod. The guy I was seeing explodes and goes, I was just asking. My head spun around. I was so confused. How could anyone have interpreted his dad's calm, nonchalant grocery list as a personal attack? In hindsight, how unfazed his dad seemed should have indicated this wasn't a rare occurrence. Story 15. My 36F, first month with my last BF. I had plans to go to the Renaissance Fair with some friends and invited him, but he had to work. He acted super pissed the night before that I was still going without him. Then the next morning he called me saying he was having a stroke, 42M smoker, and I was like, OMG, call 911. I'm OMW to your apartment. He says, no, don't come over. So I wait. He calls me from the hospital that he drove to 30 minutes later and says his brother met him there. At this point, it's clear it wasn't a stroke. And I say, can I come meet you? Which hospital? He says no. So I take my friends to the Ren Fair and text and call to check on him. He ends up flipping out on me, saying I should never have gone since he was in the hospital. I just thought since we had only been dating a month and his family was there, and he wouldn't cooperate in telling me which hospital to go to or where to meet him to see him, and he was fine. I didn't think canceling my plan was appropriate or even what he wanted. This set the stage for the rest of the relationship. He would never admit to what he wanted or needed, and actually would tell me the opposite of what he needed, sincerely, even when I said, but let me take care of you, or whatever. Histrionic displays and tantrums are a big red flag and you need to leave immediately. It ended in him almost killing me during a tantrum on a camping trip 2 years later. They do not change for you. Once you show them, you'll stay through their bad behavior. Story 16. When he, who couldn't hold down a steady job, blamed me for 2 years for losing a job he had for a month. The reason? Supposedly he was staying with me, and that's why he was late one day. But he was never late, at least not with me. Then everything got worse and hit me. Luckily, I left him, and the pandemic started. Story 17. Finding out that he was in a relationship when we started dating. We weren't official at the time, and when I found out, his buddies were giving him shit over something and made a passing comment about him still seeing a girl when we started seeing each other. I asked him about it later in private, and he told me that he had broken up with her before we officially became a couple, so I thought it was okay. He cheated on me later. To be young and dumb, LOL. Story 18. To any women here, please read this book to understand the red flags to look for. It's a full PDF. The author, a male researcher who pioneered the field of intimate partner violence, basically leaked the abusive man's playbook. What you think you know about abusive men and why they abuse is very likely wrong. I was certainly wrong. They don't abuse because of childhood trauma or mental illness, or because they just lost control, or because they need to go to anger management, or because they don't know how to handle conflict in productive ways, or because they are an alcoholic or addict. And there is no statistical pattern to the types of women who end up with men like this. It can happen to any woman. My jaw was on the floor for much of this book. Wish someone had given me this as a teen. Would have saved me from considerable harm later in life. Story 19. Relentless pursuit after I rejected him. We are taught to think that pursuit means they are interested in us and that it's romantic to be chased. But really, it's a red flag that highlights their inability to respect the word no. After 5 years of an emotionally abusive relationship, I always paid attention to that. Story 20. She had an old high school friend, boy, over until midnight-ish. Nobody spoke with me about it, even though they all knew they were good friends back in high school. I trusted her and him, since I kind of knew the guy. She ended up cheating on me with some random Latin guy at a club and then bragged about how infatuated she was with him. Straight to my face. T.I. Story 21. She would often throw out the line, maybe we shouldn't be together then. When we had disagreements if I didn't do what she wanted. I thought I knew what I wanted, and every time she'd say that, it would scare me into line about losing her. I came to a point where I told myself, all right, she says that 3 more times she's out. She did, and I said, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't, and I left. Was in that relationship for 8 years. Best thing I ever did was got out. I'm happily married to the real love of my life now, and been with her for 11 years. Story 22. On our first date, he asked me out for dinner and a movie. We went to the movie first, and by the time we got to the restaurant, it was late, 9 p.m. or so. Because he'd asked me out to dinner, I hadn't eaten beforehand and was absolutely starving. But when I said I was going to order a burger, He told me that it was too late for dinner. I was only allowed dessert. Stupid, young, naive me should have seen the red flags right then, but since he was paying, I didn't argue. And because my family thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, it led to a horrible marriage to an abusive control freak. Thankfully, he's been my ex far longer than he was my boyfriend or husband. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Story 23. I think for me it should how focused he was on independence. He had come out of a codependent relationship before me, and he was so focused on his independence. Anytime we started to get close, he would pull away. I figured he would relax when he realized I wasn't his ex, but he never did, because just turns out he has a really deep-seated fear of intimacy, and he blamed it on his ex being clingy. Also a huge one, he wouldn't respond when I talked about something negative. He would go silent or slyly avoid the conversation. AKA, he can't tolerate negative emotion. I'm sure he was always pulling out of their relationship too now that I think of it. Story 24. The way they talked about others. Behind closed doors, they would say cruel, awful things about the people in our life and strangers alike. A lot of it was especially misogynistic. I tried to stick up for those that were being insulted, but it never worked. I'm ashamed I swept this behavior under the rug. I ended up having to leave because of abuse, and as you could guess, they verbally harassed me, called me names, and tried to spread rumors about me to others. Story 25. I don't remember which was the worst. I ate a lot of them. The first one maybe was that he always spoke deep about a topic. Hours and hours without discuss, just monologue and change the topic quickly. He never heard me. The worst? I don't know. Maybe the money issues. If he saw me naked, he asked me to cover up. He turned asexual 2 years later. He just repeated, "I have stress," and screamed and impossible to speak about it. "You are sick, blah, blah." When we went to the supermarket, he didn't want to carry bags. "I'm ashamed," he said, so I was the one carrying bags. I didn't ask about it. I thought it was other trauma. He was mad. Our last dates was about helping him to assemble furniture. He threw away his old furniture and bought new. He looked at himself in the mirror a lot, and when he bought clothes, he would pass me pictures. On the other hand, if I had my makeup smeared or my blouse on backwards, he didn't notice that or said me anything. When I went bald, he didn't say me either. It was my coworkers who helped me to face my hair problem and go to the doctor. I had a period with a lot of hair loss. Now I'm fine. Multiple factors, including having to listen to him daily hours and hours, and wanting to break the relationship, and that he would not let me free. If we went to a supermarket and they didn't serve him in time, he would just walk out and leave everything there. He did this to me 4 times. If we meet, he always came 30 minutes later. He told me his problems hours and hours daily, but he didn't want to hear my problems. He just screamed. He said me things like, "You earn too well for your shit job. You have enough money, you should give your money other people." He became a communist, or I don't know. I've gone years without talking about this. If I had talked about it before, I wouldn't have put up with so much. I normalized his weird stuff. He convinced me that I sucked. I put up with it for so long because he threatened to kill himself if I left him, and because my parents always told me that you can't stand anything. But I'd rather be alone and put up with nothing than lose my hair and health again with another madman. Even though he earned $6K a month, he wasted it all and asked me for money. I never left him any money, but I gave him food. I've been telling all this and more to many people, and someone told me, "One day you will meet the father of your children, a man who will carry your bags, at the moment you least expect it." Story 26. I was her first boyfriend. I was going into 10th grade. She just graduated high school. We lived more than an hour apart, so our relationship was 98% over chat. She created a username as the future Mrs. Lynch when we had been dating for only 2 weeks. She was talking marriage and babies, and I am 15 and can't even drive. We dated for 2 months, and I had to end the relationship. Story 27. He told me he'd deleted all his dating apps. A couple months later, I found out he not only still had them, but he was still actively talking to people. When I asked him whether he was still on dating apps, knowing he was, he lied and said he wasn't. I told him I knew he was lying, made him show me his phone, and he said he was just on them to mess with people. I started crying and tried to leave his apartment, but he apologized and begged me to stay. I then proceeded to stay with him for 5 years. He later told me he'd perceived my emotional reaction to finding this out as a red flag. And guess what? He turned out to be an emotionally unavailable serial cheater and habitual liar with an aversion to respect and open communication. This wasn't even the only red flag. He also had a female best friend that he'd cuddle, sometimes in bed, and watch shows with, and he kept replicating our dates with her. E.g., he took me to a hockey game and gave me a jersey to wear. Then he did the exact same thing with her a couple weeks later. I asked him to take me to the movies on a date, and he said he didn't like going to movie theaters, then posted on his Snapchat story about going to the theater to see a movie with that girl the next week. Yeah, I might be stupid. Just this week, I found out that after our breakup, he's once again been talking to/sleeping with the people he cheated on me with while we were together. So it really doesn't seem like the therapy he claims to be in is doing much for him. Story 28. She refused to do anything without me, wouldn't go job hunting without me, wouldn't keep track of her bills without me, would get extremely upset if I wasn't there to walk her through things she 100% knew how to do by herself. It was such a weird relationship. I was way into the whole, I'd do anything for my girl to have any sort of spine to stand up for myself. She broke up with me once but still wanted to be best friends and stalked me to my college dorm. We got back together, and that was another few years of that dumb relationship. Story 29. He didn't have many friends. I thought it was because he was a weird kid or whatever, and my mom told me to give the weird kid a chance, so I talked to him, and over the course of 4 years, I lost a lot of my friends too because he isolated me. He was always putting me down. My first bit of clarity came when I showed someone a picture of him, not that attractive, and they said, "He looks nice," and my response was, "But he's not." Still talked to him for about a year and a half after that. Glad that's a thing of the past, and sometimes thankful to have had the experience. Now, I understand why some people don't leave toxic relationships that they know are no good for them. Story 30. The biggest was when he would point to people walking on the street and call them fat pigs. Waiters were stupid if the meal was exactly as per his instructions. Once he faked that, he got an STD in an attempt to get me to confess to cheating. I was taking 24 credit hours in a summer college semester and naturally didn't have much free time to spend with him, so he assumed I must be cheating because it's easy to take that many courses. Another time he got mad that I embarrassed him by taking too long to go to the bathroom at a concert, so he left me at the concert. This was in the days before Uber, and we were an hour's drive away from home, so there was no way I could afford a cab. I had to call everyone I knew trying to find a ride before he found me. I went home with him because I was desperate. I had to pee on the way, so I asked him to stop at a gas station. He refused, but did stop on the side of the road so I could pee. I still stayed for another year after all of that because I was dumb. Don't be me. ETA, I forgot another red flag that happened in that year I stayed. I was in the process of applying to law school, and he knew that. We were out and about, and he said he needed to meet up with a friend. When we got there, he encouraged me to go inside, and it was a drug dealer's house. Weed, but still illegal. I just stood there not sure what to do while they weighed out the weed and exchanged money. The entire time I was freaking out that this one experience would prevent me from achieving my goals, so that was fun.